You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good, man. Let rookie draft season commence for all of you diehard dynasty aficionados, I think is the word I want to use. I have
sickos.
Only three.
Sickos is the word you want.
I only have 3 going at the moment, but yeah, like these guys are all chomping at the bit, like let's go. I'm like, okay, like this is. I don't like drafting the week after the draft personally. Like I want my thoughts to settle. Like I feel like after covering the draft and talking about it and everything else, like I feel like I'm a little biased in some areas, and I think at times day 2, day 3, I get caught up with the family after spending all of day 1 here on the air with you guys. So it's a lot of catching up to start these things. So I'm glad they're slow clocks. Like I'm glad they're 8-hour clocks and I can kind of peek through things and do some research. But nevertheless, here we are. It is Tuesday night post 2024 NFL draft. And I'm glad to be here with you guys. And the season is officially kicked off.
It sure has. I might derail us here for a second. I'll let Derek get his thoughts. We were trading kind of horror stories of jobs, or at least I was trading a horror story of a job that I had before we jumped on and started recording. And being that we just got to witness, 256 people figure out what their job is going to be, presumably for the next couple of months at least. Their options are a little bit better than my worst job, which I think it will always be working in the back of that kitchen, Kevin. I can't. We'll tell on it later, but if you guys want to go off the rails here a little bit, because we are just going to be talking about the NFC and teams and how they did and players and everything for fantasy wise. But you guys want to talk about your least favorite or like your worst job, since we just saw 250 people figure out what their next job is going to be?
Starbucks.
Oh, you worked at Starbucks?
I worked at a Starbucks. It was right as I was finishing high school and going into college.
Nice.
It was connected to a Safeway. So really it was a combination of like I had to be bagger, cart shagger / barista aficionado. I despised that job. Every day it was grueling, but it was a paycheck. It served its purpose. I learned some lessons and found out real quickly what I did not want to do in life. So I made some adjustments to make sure that was not the path that I was headed down, because God bless those people. I love my cup of coffee, and I don't want it all fancy dancy. Like I get a cross-eyed look when I just go in. I'm like, I want a large black coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking at me like, that's it? I'm like, yes. Like, I don't want room for cream. I want a dark roast, large black coffee. Like, that's it. And they all look like I'm crazy, but
it's just because they never hear that.
Right?
Oh,
like, I think,
okay.
Yeah. Like, I think their coffee is really good. The Sumatra is my favorite. Like, I've tried a lot of different coffees. Maybe not as many as some, but I feel like I've tried my fair share, and the Sumatra is definitely my favorite. But working in that combination, not for me, sir. I did not like that job.
Fair enough. Since I sprung it on you, I'll let Derek answer after I answer.
Oh, I'm gonna pass. I've got nothing nice to say.
That's fair. And they say if you don't got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yep, just a hard pass at that one.
I can tell you the easiest job that Derek or I ever had was we did a summer
working for the University of Northern Colorado in their recycling department.
No, it wasn't recycling. It was like their maintenance crew. Like so yeah, we went through and we drilled grommet holes and all the new desks in the dorm rooms, and sometimes we'd show up, and sometimes I'd roll over to Derek's house and he'd still be asleep. I'm like, okay, screw it, and I'd lay down. Like I just fell asleep, whether it was on the couch, on the floor, hell, I think there were a couple times I just told Derek, move over, dude, like like that. And so we slept and then played with, what did we play? NCAA football. Like,
yeah. Yep. So good times.
Summer jobs working for the university were really, really good. Craig and I had a good summer when we both worked for the recycling department. That was a great summer. So my worst job, it wasn't because of the people, but I was so bad at it that like I worked in the back of the kitchen at a barbecue restaurant. Kevin actually got me the job. And I worked salads. There was something else that went with salads, right? Or was it just salads?
Yeah, it was like salads and plate prep, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I also worked the fryer. And oh my God, was I so bad at the fryer. To this day, I haven't had this job for
many moons.
15 years at least. It's been 15 years. To this day, when somebody talks about catfish, I shudder a little bit because there was this thing on the menu. It was catfish.
The fried catfish was terrible.
It took 6 minutes to cook. I still remember that. It took 6 minutes to cook that catfish. And these jackwagons had an appetizer version of it. So like, apps are supposed to go out quick. Like the second the app walks into the back of the house, it should be walking back out to the front of the house, right? Like that's how an appetizer. And this app catfish that I still to this day shudder. Like I can't even eat catfish because I shudder at the thought of that fried catfish. Working
and then
there.
as the night went on, the timer had to go longer because the fryer temp cooled down. Like it was nuts. Like everything else was like 3 minutes, right?
Yes,
Potato
everything.
Skins, wings, fries, like fried
everything
green
was
beans,
like
all
3
that was like
minutes.
3 minutes. You were good, and
Tops.
then catfish, and it just killed because it was only a 6-basket fryer. Like
Yes.
there were 3 sections, 2 baskets in each section, and so it just killed your time because you threw all this catfish in and then you have all it was a mess. It was a circus working that fryer, and it was definitely
I don't remember that guy's
expert
name, but
level
one guy,
Tetris.
Yeah, there was one guy who's super good at it, and I was like, I don't understand how you even like
Mike Harrell.
That dude was awesome. This was a rock star when it came to work in that fryer. Anyways, here's how bad I was. I was bad at the fryer. So like they kicked me off the fryer because I don't know that there was ever a shift that I lasted the entire shift on the fryer. There might have been a handful. I worked there for 2 months, by the way. This all happened within like a 2-month span. And so they would put me on salad making, and there was only a handful of different types of salads. I know one of them was like a Cobb salad that had like a bunch of different, your ham and your egg and your tomatoes and your cheese. And I messed up every single one of those salads that I ever made. Like God forbid you did a substitution and like no eggs. And it's like, I'm going to make this salad with eggs 6 times. It's going to get sent back to me 6 different times. I'm going to be sitting here picking out little pieces of egg from the lettuce because I don't know how to make these damn salads the right way. I was so bad at that job. Kevin worked at that restaurant. I quit. I had other opportunities presented themselves. And I quit that job. And for like a couple of years after I stopped working there, Kevin still worked there. And if you messed up a salad, my name got brought up. Like that's how remarkably bad I was at making salads. That like I would get brought up about when somebody screwed up a salad.
I got ranch Italian and chunky blue cheese.
It was so bad. I was so bad. I'm glad to have had that experience. I worked, some serving shifts too at another friend of ours, Italian restaurant. I kind of worked in the back there sometimes too. And I have an appreciation for what servers and cooks and chefs go through. I have an appreciation. Doesn't always mean that I agree with how they're doing things, but I also know that sometimes you just get your you-know-what handed to you, and there's nothing you can do about it because everybody and their brother gets sat down, and when that app catfish walks in, drop everything, throw the catfish in the damn fryer.
Alex, it still amazes me that you never learned how to fry a salad.
I'll finish the story this way. I did never get they call them a Bible, right? It's a Bible that tells you what everything is, how everything is prepared and cooked, and how each salad is supposed to look and be. I never got one of those, so I was trying to learn on the fly. And I think by the time
studied it anyway, get out of here.
I wouldn't have, but it probably would have helped. Rather than just being yelled at a lot. I got yelled at so much at that job. It was so bad. I was so bad at that job. I'm so glad that like you, Kevin, I figured out that is not how I want to spend. That's not how I want to make money. So we got to figure out a way that we can do a different way to make money than that.
Fair enough. Well, do you suppose there's any young men that just had their names called here this last week that are going, what in the world did I get myself into? Probably not. Since this is yeah. So, but anyway, that was my attempt at a segue there. Massive fail. So,
sorry, it was a good attempt.
Yeah,
I don't know that there's anybody saying what did I get myself into, but I definitely think that there's some going, probably not the best landing spot for me, or man, this was perfect. Like this was just spot on for what I wanted. So
I am curious, like genuine reaction from some of these dudes. Like, look, when you're a high level athlete, your confidence is through the roof, that you believe that you are the best, right? Like that's how a lot of these athletes get to where they are, because they believe that they're the best. They work to make sure that they're the best, right? They may not be the best, but in their own minds, they are. But if you go to a team that is not the best, like there's probably something in the back of Caleb Williams' mind where he's like, we got a lot of work to do, right? And the Bears haven't been good for a very long time. And they got a lot of work to do. And I wonder if there's situations like that where some dudes are very excited. I just saw a video today of somebody who got a phone call. They were getting drafted by the Chargers. And they were like, oh, man, I'm so excited. I love Coach Harbaugh. I love it. And, of course, that's what you're going to tell your future employer. But, like, this kid seemed really genuine, that he really wanted to land with the Chargers. But, like, I can't imagine that there's somebody that gets a phone call from throw out a team. It doesn't matter. But, like, a team that's not great. And they're like, oh, no. Like, literally anybody but them.
I don't know. That seemed to be Brock Bowers' look on his face. But yes.
The crazy thing is, he's from that area. Like, he's from the LA area, right? California. He has a bunch of family and friends that are Raiders fans. Like, they were pumped up for sure. They're like, oh, sweet. Now we can go to games. Like, now we can go. So.
The funniest thing, though, Alex, when you were sitting there describing that and you kept talking about Caleb Williams and the best and all of that, I had an 80s movie montage just play in my head while you were going through that with that song going on, the best around. The best around. So anyway, yeah,
that was pretty good early 90s, late 80s movie kick here.
Yeah, we're certainly onto something tonight. I don't know if it's good.
Oh, it's from Karate Kid.
So, yeah. Anyway, we've got plenty of references going, even movie montages going there. But anyway, you're kind of going through that. Any thoughts as far as we'll kind of go through it. We're going to stick with the NFC side of things, really kind of focusing on players that landed in opportune landing spots, players whose landing spots weren't the best from a fantasy perspective. Where do we want to start at?
Well, I think the obvious one, right, and it's one that we can probably talk ad nauseum, is Michael Penix Jr., right? Like going to Atlanta where they just spent $140 million or whatever it was for 4 years of Kirk Cousins. And then you go and use the 8th pick in the draft to go get a quarterback who's not a young quarterback, right? He's older. Like he'll be 28, 29 when Cousins' contract is up, right? Now, whether or not they get 4 years out of Kirk Cousins in Atlanta is a completely different story, different thing to talk about. But I think that's the one still now almost a week removed that I haven't quite wrapped my head around. And there were a lot of head scratchers, but that's the one that sticks out to me.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's going to get an answer that they feel is justifiable for that pick in that situation with what this team needs, with what they could have done. Like, it's just going to be, and then if Penix gets on the field, right? Like, there's no guarantee with Cousins. He could, be fully recovered from that Achilles injury. And I mean, the 4 years is up, then you're doing, a 1 year trial, right? If you pick up his 5th year option. But there's a couple problems with this. And it's not so much, it's not the player, right? It's not Michael Penix, but it's the situation that it puts Atlanta in. Because if you look at the rookie wage scale for the quarterback position in the first round, it essentially means that year 3 and year 4 of Kirk Cousins' deal, they will be paying close to $60 million between those two quarterbacks.
Well, and not only that, Kirk Cousins in year 3 and in year 4 has a $57.5 million dead cap.
Right.
So,
like it completely cap straps the Falcons. Like their salary cap guy did not pound the table and threaten to throw blows loud enough, because it's going to hurt. Like, Atlanta's going to be in a pain for a long time, because in that same time, guess whose contracts come up?
right.
Drake London,
Bijan
Kyle
Robinson,
Pitts, Bijan, right? Bijan's only coming in, so his 5th year would be the 4th year of Cousins' deal, right? And then you're still messing with. They got a lot of first rounders that their time to get paid is going to come up, and not all those guys are going to stay in Atlanta. So
Right.
I will tell you, on the flip side, who won out of that was Drake London.
Mm-hmm.
Drake London is now the clear alpha. And then going alongside of that is Darnell Mooney. Right. So the 2 wide receivers won because they didn't bring another guy in that they have to compete with. So Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Darnell Mooney were all clear winners, because there's no one that they have to compete with for targets other than each other. And Cousins is more than capable of feeding 3 mouths, right? He was able to do it fairly consistently in Minnesota, and I think that trend's going to continue. So, for that aspect, right, the prime star players in Atlanta, absolutely fantasy relevant. So, with the loss comes the win for this particular situation. One of the first round kind of losses for me was Ricky Pearsall, right? I think he went a little early. I do. But B, as the roster sits, he's 5th in the pecking order. Right? You have Christian McCaffrey, who's clearly one.
Yep.
Right.
Ayuk, Debo, and Kittle. And then Pearsall. So he's walking into a situation where he was getting a lot of hype coming into the draft, right? The last 2-3 weeks, you started hearing his name pop up more and what he could do, and teams were getting pretty excited about him. And I understand why this is a guy that San Francisco thought they wanted. And if they end up moving on from Debo or Ayuk, I think this makes a little bit more sense, but they have to move on from him first. But going into this season, right? So even if they play out and then they let Ayuk walk, right? They don't resign him. Even if they play out this season, for fantasy redraft purposes, Pearsall is is a loser coming into this season because of everybody in front of him.
Okay.
It's going to be tough to pull the trigger on a Pearsall, right? Like he's going to have to be at the right spot at the right time for you. But even still, that's going to be a tough spot to think like, oh yeah, he's going to see some volume down there in San Francisco, not with all those other guys still on the roster and in the way, right? I think it also hurts a little bit. We'll see how it plays out. But I think that also hurts Kittle a little bit, right? There's only so many places for a ball to go. And like, it probably eats into Kittle a little bit more than it does any of the other three, right? More so than it would McCaffrey or Ayuk or Deebo. Like, that kind of hurts. So I think a lot of people who have Kittle shares right now need to be wondering what the hell's going on over there in Santa Clara.
It makes him super boomer bust.
It really does.
It's going to make it hard to get conconsistency out of Kittle is what it's going to do. So,
and he already was kind of that way, right? Like he already was a boomer bust play.
Yeah, he officially moved to best ball only territory for me. Like I will not draft Kittle in a redraft league. I just won't do it. I will probably take a share or two in the right situation in a redraft league because those boom weeks are awesome. But I'm going to have to make sure I back him up with someone who's pretty stinking consistent to help make up for those floor weeks because I think we're going to see a fair number of those as well.
All right. I'm going to take Kittle in the 12th round of a redraft. But yeah, if you tell
that's about where he needs to go, right?
Like right. I mean, he's going to go before that, right? We all know he's going to go in the 7th, right? Is where he's probably going to go. The 10th, you start really eyeballing it, right? If he's sliding, like, ooh, like okay, maybe, you know, yeah, the 12th. You get to the 10th or 11th, and I'd probably think, okay, like we're gonna play with this and see if we can't get lightning to strike here for a couple weeks early in the season, and maybe flip him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, Arizona had a couple of guys go right, like Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, kind of a big winner there. Really, kind of the only show in town there when it comes to wide receiver. But an interesting one though, is I think the addition of Trey Benson actually hurts the James Conner fantasy relevance here this coming year.
It does. I think it gives a true spell back to Conner, right? Like even if this first year, if your plan is, ride Conner till the wheels fall off, you can do that and still get Trey Benson immersed in NFL life, getting him used to touches, everything else. Obviously, the weight room, film study, get him to work on pass pro. Like, so there's a lot of things that they'll be able to do with Benson, but you're right, for fantasy purposes, there probably were a couple better landing spots for this year, but going forward, it does kind of set him up nicely.
Right.
So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, Kyler's a winner because now he has a true 1 and 2 option between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride.
Right.
So, and I don't think this affects McBride at all. Like, I really don't. I think this might actually help McBride because they're not going to be able to shade extra guys into the middle because that safety might have to stay out wide and worry about Harrison Jr., particularly the back half of the season after these wide receivers kind of get used to things and start to get going. So we might see a slower start out of McBride, but last year was a slow start, right? Until he got his chance and then he popped. So we might see something fairly similar. I think he'll be a little bit more consistent starting out or a little bit more fantasy relevant starting out because he's the starter and he's not playing for scraps. But I think he'll have a big year down there in the desert.
Yeah.
I've got mixed reviews, and really it boils down to quarterback. If you guys are ready to talk about some other spots,
I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about.
But I think let's just go. Pick one, right? Let's talk about Caleb Williams, because I felt like the Bears, and this is kind of what I thought was going to happen. The Bears would get Caleb Williams, and I thought they'd go get Caleb Williams a target, and they did. They went and got Caleb Williams, and then they went and got Romeo Odunze. And I think that's the best way to go about it, right? Now, you probably want to protect your asset in Caleb Williams, and I could understand if you wanted to go tackle, especially given, how that draft ended up shaping out with all of the O linemen that were, taken there in that first round. But I like the pick there of getting Odunze. I think maybe not this year, maybe year 2 it's better, right? Because you get a year of NFL football for both of them, for Odunze and Caleb Williams. But I think in Dynasty, they're a good stash play, right? They're obviously, I think, and I haven't been in any Dynasty drafts, Kevin, but are they going, is Williams going the 101 in every one that you've been in?
No.
Okay.
A lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. Even in Superflex.
Interesting. Okay.
Marvin Harrison Jr. But Caleb Williams is not getting past. Caleb Williams is not getting past 3, even in a single quarterback league that I've seen.
Sure.
Right.
So I think the Bears did well there with their first 2 picks. And yes, your top 2 picks do not make a draft, but I think they did okay there. And I think they had some fantasy relevance in terms of, again, maybe not in 2024, but maybe in 25 and 26, 2-3 years down the road. So the long con here might be the way to go.
If based off the skill position players around him, I would tell you that if Caleb Williams throws for less than 25 touchdowns in his rookie year, it is a bust. You have Keenan Allen coming over, basically a 1-year rental, right? So that's why you're able to draft Odunze, right? Like,
right.
You get to learn from Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and then you kind of get to, take over that spot, because I don't see Allen staying with the Bears after this year. But you have the 3 of them. You have Cole Kmet back, who's a very serviceable tight end who's able to block and catch. You brought over DeAndre Swift, and he's able to catch balls out of the backfield, right? Not the greatest in pass pro, but he helps the quarterback get rid of the ball quickly, right? Screen plays. He runs to the outside mostly. He's not great going through the A or B gap, but the C gap, where he's able to get outside, is typically where he's a little bit more effective. So they have tons of skill position players around him. Caleb Williams might be in the best. He might be in the best situation of any top rookie quarterback that we've seen in about the last decade.
Probably since Andrew Luck, really.
Right. I mean, I think you could absolutely make an argument for that, of just as far as the talent that he already has around him, right? And this is a luxury to the Bears, because it wasn't their pick, it was Carolina's, but it's what they got for passing on a quarterback last year. So, we'll see if it works out. I thought the Bears drafted well. Yes, they got some offensive line help later in the draft. Obviously, Williams, Odunze, a little bit of help across the defense, but in 3 years, we'll find out, right? It's going to be put up or shut up time for that front office, because the last year and the next 3 years is all their creation. And it will most likely be a ripple effect for that franchise going forward for probably the next 10, based off of how everything shakes out.
Right. So, yeah, no, I would agree with that for sure. Let's go ahead and head on over to right. You just mentioned the team, Carolina, the pick the Bears were picking at number 1 this year. They went out and spent some early capital on some skill possession players with some potential fantasy relevance, right? They trade up into the first round to get Xavier Legette, the wide receiver. They go out and spend, round 2 capital on Jonathan Brooks, the running back there. Thoughts on these landing positions for these guys?
I think Carolina, I think those are both good situations. Brooks coming off the injury. We'll see what the true timetable is for him being able to see live fire, right? How, does he Is he able to go through rookie OTAs? Is he in a non-contact jersey? Like, what does this actually look like? But Carolina didn't do anything to help Bryce Young last year. The team as a whole made a lot of favorable offseason moves for him. They brought in a couple of guards to help with the run game. Obviously, bringing in Xavier Legette, who I've heard a lot of people compare him to a rich man's Jonathan Mingo, which is funny because they have Jonathan Mingo on that roster as well. So we'll see how this pairs up with Adam Thielen. I still think they're hurting at tight end. Like they still need a true solution there.
Not a fan of Jatavion Sanders.
I think he's most likely the starter. Like,
that's
he's better than Tommy Tremble. Like, and this, it just wasn't a great tight end class after Brock Bowers, right? Like it was not 3, 4, 5 tight ends deep like we saw last year.
Right.
Where you could have, you didn't have to have, the top end number one tight end to feel like you made an improvement on that position last year. You could settle for the third or fourth guy and you got a really good player out of it. This year wasn't quite built that way. A lot of these guys are just guys. So that is what it is. But I do think they're going to be fantasy relevant. I think Bryce will improve from a pretty abysmal rookie campaign. We're going to see how much of a year 2 leap he's able to take with a new coaching staff, new playbook, kind of a new philosophy there in Carolina. And if Mingo can kind of make that step with Young, I think that will help. But ultimately, I'm assuming it's going to be Thielen and Legette kind of running that show there as far as the wide receivers go. And we're going to see. So on paper, it's a win because it's a clear path to volume and targets, which fantasy related, we love, right? We love clear paths to volume and clear paths to target. It makes those guys have a nice safe floor for us when we're drafting them. But by the time they hit the field, I mean, I don't know, Brooks slow start, I'm assuming, right? And again, this is just coming off the injury. It's how he recovers and how his body handles coming off of an ACL injury.
But he's also going to have to work his way past Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, right? Like those are 2 dudes that he's going to have to work it. Yeah, I know.
Miles Sanders is long in the tooth. Chuba will do his thing, right? He was clearly the best back last year. Miles, he's just stealing money from the organization at this point. Like the fact that people thought that he was going to be Saquon 2.0 coming out of Penn State were fooling themselves.
Yeah. Fair enough. I would say, what about Dallas? Dallas really only had one wide receiver that was taken there. I mean, if anything, you could say that the winning positions were, guys like CeeDee Lamb already there with not really anybody to challenge for targets on that team now. So any thoughts there? Are we ready to just kind of keep moving along?
I think Lamb's kind of the easy one. I think it's Brandon Cooks who was the winner, not necessarily Lamb. I think he was going to kind of get his regardless. I think it's Brandon Cooks who won, and really the winner was Zeke Elliott.
Yeah, that's who I was going to say, right? It's like Zeke comes back to Dallas now, right? So now you've got a guy who, there's some familiarity there, right? So like that's helpful.
Right. Yeah.
But that to me was their best draft weekend acquisition.
Right.
I didn't mind Guyton, right?
No.
Like they needed some offensive line help. I didn't mind Guyton. He'll slide in on the right side. I know some people are kind of bagging on that pick, but it's like, yes, I feel like Graham would have been better for them. So I was trying to understand the reasoning of sliding back, but if you felt like your need was more at tackle than it was on the interior, then it made sense. You got some value, you still got your tackle, and now you're off to the races. So again, it's gonna depend. If Guyton isn't starting, then it was a waste. But if Guyton's able to step out in that right tackle position from day one and kind of cement that as his own, then I don't see there's anything wrong with it necessarily. The Cowboys want to run the ball more, but they keep saying that they want to run the ball more, but they're not necessarily making the moves to do that. And they're basically going to have a three-headed back, right, between Davis and Zeke and Dowdle. So, again, Zeke will flash. It wouldn't surprise me if he got the starts, being the veteran guy. But what do the starts get you? 15 carries and 55 yards. Right? Is that kind of Zeke's stat line? 15 carries, 55 yards, and 6 touchdowns? I haven't even looked at statting these guys out, but that just feels kind of right to me.
Yeah.
He'll have one blow-up game against the Eagles because he does every season. Like, he just tortures the Eagles. But outside of that, if he sees 15 touches a game, I think you get more than your use out of him, because that means you still have another 10 to 12 touches plus that you need to spread across the other two backs.
Fair enough. So Detroit went out and spent all but 2 picks on defensive side of the ball and then line there. But I think they're definitely kind of a clear-cut winner in this one, and that would be Jameson Williams. Allowing, not bringing in really any additional competition to go through that and try and challenge that one there. Any thoughts on Detroit?
I'd agree. Detroit showed that they are putting their trust and faith into Jameson Williams and his development to be the running mate to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we'll see how this goes. Clearly they got a good thing going at running back, right? We saw that last year between Gibbs and
Monty.
There's a good thing going there. They're set at tight end. They just signed St. Brown to a massive deal. Congratulations. We're super happy for you about that.
Right.
So I think they did right. They needed to improve on the defense. It was the defense that failed them against San Francisco, right? They jumped out to this massive lead. And yes, the offense quit putting points up on the board, but the defense has to make a stop too and help out your offense. And so Dan Campbell went out and he got some more of his guys to bring in and try and make a statement on the defensive side of the ball. So, good for the Lions, but I would agree the big winner out of Detroit was Williams, because he's given kind of this last year to prove that he is NFL caliber.
I like it. Alrighty. Green Bay did, they spent all sorts of capital kind of all over the place here. Really only kind of bringing in one guy of note that may have any fantasy impact there, Marshawn Lloyd. And at that point, I would say that he was actually a fantasy loser when it came to that landing spot, coming into a situation where he's going to be the clear-cut guy behind Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
And AJ Dillon.
Yeah, and there's a chance he's the third.
Yeah. He's
I think
third,
Dillon's gone
third on
year,
there.
though.
Oh, sure. But for this year,
Yeah, for this year, yeah. And I like Marshawn Lloyd too. Like, I think he can do some really good things in the NFL, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Like, he's going to have to, play his role for a rookie year. Probably see some more touches in year 2, year 3, but Jacobs is going to be the lead guy. And Lloyd's going to have to figure out what impact he can make in camp to earn himself snaps, because this is one of those situations where it's not going to be given to him. They don't give a crap that he was a 3rd-round pick. You have a rushing champion, right? Rushing yardage champion in Josh Jacobs. And we're going to see how Love continues to progress with his young wide receiver core. So could have been a better spot for Lloyd, but Green Bay does have a knack of just drafting guys and they let them learn, right? Like, they do let them learn. Wide receivers kind of been the outlier a little bit, because it's just been such a position of need. But outside of that, let him sit for a year and learn. Save the tread. right? Save the tread. You know, you got him for 4 years. Save the tread. Let him learn. Get him in sparingly a little bit, and then you can spell it out. And who knows? He's one injury away from being pretty fantasy relevant. But as things sit, I would agree that he's on the losing end more so than the winning end.
Right. And kind of the winning end, right? You have a 3 kind of wide receivers there, and them not going out and spending any draft capital there on wide receiver kind of helps those guys, and as we kind of see them coming into the season there, not having to shuffle the deck, so to speak, on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, any other thoughts here on Green Bay?
No. So again, as a club, offense, solid draft.
Right? Yeah. That's going to be a good
solid draft as a club.
Jordan Love, good. Christian Watson when healthy, good. Right? Like, there were flashes
He's probably
last
the
year.
biggest winner on that offense by them not drafting somebody.
They didn't go get a receiver to compete with him, right? Like,
he's got a flash this year.
Dobbs has been a serviceable wideout in Watson's absence, and even when Watson was on the field, right? Like, they've got something cooking there in Green Bay. I mean, the team was good enough to make the playoffs last year, so it's a good team.
Right. All right, let's head on over to the Rams. Really, kind of the Rams. Really, kind of only pick there was Blake Corum, in the 3rd round there as far as a running back, and this is one of those that it'll be interesting to see what they do, because Sean McVay has certainly had a history of the draft capital doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot there when they go out and get a guy for especially a running back position. But do you think that he really challenges Kyren Williams here at all?
Not to start. Kyren Williams is going to be given every opportunity to hold down that lead back position, and it's going to be his to lose. But if he gets dinged up again, then Corum's in a great spot. I mean, I'd say this is meh, right? Like, as it sits, he's sitting 2, maybe 3 on the depth chart just due to lack of experience. You get through camp, he's a gritty fighter, right? And I think McVay will appreciate that. So I think he'll earn himself some touches, but Kyron's going to have lead back duties unless he does something, kind of crazy to just give that up.
Yeah. This team is going to be interesting, right? Like, just what is this offense going to look like? What is the defense going to look like, right? Like, we know that Stafford is good. We know Kupp is good. Nakua burst onto the scene last year, but I don't know. They weren't all that impressive, and they, outside of Nakua last year, and wasn't Kupp hurt most of last year? Or am I imagining
to start the season he was?
It was just a very interesting. This is one of those teams that it used to be like automatic, right? Like, you wanted a piece of the Rams offense, and I think to a certain extent there is, some of that. I think with Kupp or Nakua, I think you're still okay. Maybe not drafting Kupp as high as you did last year. You're certainly drafting Nakua higher than you did last year, because none of y'all drafted him. Don't even act like you did. And Kyren, that backfield is going to be, I think it is going to be a competition back there with Corum. Like, I think that's the reason you bring that guy in. Again, to your point though, Kevin, early it's Kyron's backfield, but I think as the season progresses, we might see a little bit more of a competition there. Might be some touches that go away, and God forbid Williams get injured.
They just didn't want to bring Darrell Henderson back off the streets like they had to last year, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
See how it shakes out, but yeah, McVay's tendencies, he leans on one.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So Minnesota really only went out and from a fantasy perspective, really only added the quarterback position, but that one could very well have big rippling effects there. Any thoughts as far as Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson as far as fantasy impact by JJ McCarthy coming to town?
I don't know that it changes things terribly. Now, I don't think Jefferson's going to be hyper targeted the way that Cousins did. But I think that the balance might actually be more beneficial for Jefferson in some ways, to get some of that coverage shifted off. Now, the Vikings were able to make this work with some scrubs at quarterback last year. Absolute scrubs after Cousins went down. I believe McCarthy's intelligent enough to do just as good, if not better. And, outside of the week 17 game against the Packers, Jefferson was amazing down the stretch. He was amazing with really no one of note throwing him the football. So, you bring in your rookie guy, you let them start working together and leaning on each other a little bit. Jefferson's, a full-on veteran now. So he knows what he's talking about. He knows how to explain what he likes and what he's seeing and how that works. And it's just getting McCarthy used to being able to just let her rip sometimes. Because that is not what they did at Michigan, right? Harbaugh had a pretty tight leash on his quarterbacks. And McCarthy made it work, right? He is a winner. The kid just finds a way to win. And the Vikings, was it 2 seasons ago where they had all the one score games?
Yeah.
Where they squeaked them out. Last year didn't quite go their way. Obviously, injuries played a factor into that, whatnot. But sometimes it's just a pedigree, and if you can bring that in and it clicks just right, you get lightning in a bottle, or at least a very serviceable quarterback, because your skill position talent's so great that they elevate the quarterback.
Fair enough. So New Orleans went out and really didn't add anything on the offensive side of the ball. Spencer Rattler in the 5th round, Bub Means in the 5th round at wide receiver. Any thoughts here on New Orleans, or just kind of standing, rinse and repeat from last year?
So in single quarterback leagues, Spencer Rattler is my 4th round choice. In just for now, like that is just going to be my flat 4th round rookie choice in dynasty leagues. I want shares of him. The kid's a gamer, right? Like he has a swag about him. Like he's getting his shot. Yes, he has to sit behind Carr, but I don't think anybody in New Orleans is necessarily sold on Derek Carr after what they saw last year. So, can he push him? I don't know that he's going to push him this year. So win, loss, draw, whatever. I don't think anybody was expecting Spencer Rattler to be a win for fantasy purposes this year anyway. But I think he put himself, or it was drafted into a spot where opportunity will come. We will see Spencer Rattler start games in a Saints uniform before it's all said and done with.
I like him back to last year. I was trying to tell somebody, like, Texas A&M was getting ready to go play South Carolina. And they're like, like A&M should win this game pretty easily, right? And I was like, well, it just depends. It depends on if Spencer Rattler decides to be Spencer Rattler or doesn't, right? Because, like, that dude, when he is on, could be, or really was, one of the top quarterbacks in college football last year, if he wanted to be Spencer Rattler. Now, that was easier said than done, and obviously SEC defenses are SEC defenses, and stuff is a little bit easier in the Big 12. Moving the football is a little bit easier in the Big 12. But, like, that dude was an X factor, and so I think he carries that with him into the NFL, and I think that it's got to be better, and I think that the Boo Birds will be loud for Derek Carr. I think New Orleans fans will just want something else. And I think that Rattler will be the benefactor of a fan base that will be rather disgruntled, I think, by week 8.
Yeah. Rattler has the trait that I wish Bo Nix had as a Broncos fan, right? Rattler can step into a game and say, today I'm going to take care of this. And he just did. Like, we saw him do it. So it was the one thing. It's my one big knock on Nix, right? I've said it on the show. I said it on the draft. Like Bo Nix just never was able to go out and will his team to victory.
Right.
He played really well. Yes, a 75.8% completion percentage is awesome. Only throwing 8 interceptions in a pretty pass happy conference like the Pac-12 is really good. Like there's some things that I do think are going to translate well to the NFL game. We'll get into this more when we get into the AFC side, but the trait that Rattler has is what Alex was just saying, is he can step onto the field and he goes from average Joe to Superman
It's incredible
in the blink of an eye. And
Yeah.
there's really no defining reason as to why he's able to turn it on and then at the same time not turn it on. Like he has
it's
some
not
of that too, right? Like
it's not really clear why it's not there all the time, but it's not
Yeah.
there all the time. We know it's not there all the time, but when it is
when
there,
he's on, yeah, he's a hell of a lot of fun to
he's
watch when it's
electric.
on.
Yeah.
He was that way at Oklahoma too. Derek got to
Yeah.
watch that, right?
Yep.
And yes, he had to grow up a little bit, and everybody says that. Like Rattler said it, Oklahoma's acknowledged it, South Carolina's acknowledged it. Like Rattler, I mean, everybody's said, like, look, I had some growing up to do. Like,
Mhm.
my britches were a little too big, right? Essentially, and he had to figure that out. Got humbled a little bit when they brought in Williams, and Rattler said, "Okay, peace out. I'm not doing this," and found some success at South Carolina. Right? He was able to give teams some hell. I mean, he beat Clemson 2 seasons ago in a game that Clemson had no business losing, but South Carolina went on the end of season tear, and everyone's like, holy smokes! Like, here we go. So he's proven he can do it, and he's proven he can beat competition that is better than he or his team is. I never saw that particular thing out of Bo Nix, and that's what my I don't know. I don't know about regret is the right word, but that's where my
Grumblings.
rumblings, yes, and my dissatisfaction is with Nix. Is he doesn't have the Superman factor.
Fair enough. And actually, that'll be interesting, right? Like Alex was bringing out like the Boo Birds and talking about some of that. And so, yeah, one of those that I could just imagine that Spencer Rattler would kind of relish that one, that the fan base turns on the starting quarterback and he's the guy that gets brought in there, because that was very much the case with the transition from Spencer Rattler to Caleb Williams at Oklahoma there. So,
Yeah. He'll be the most popular guy in New Orleans at some point this season, right? Being the backup quarterback, because it's always, it's the glitz and glamour of what could be. Like we know what Derek Carr is, but what's the kid got? Like let's see the kid go out and sling it and see if he can play with the big boys. And if he shows well, I mean, he'll, like I said, I believe he will start games in a Saints uniform. I won't guarantee that it's this year, but I also wouldn't be surprised if come week 14, 15, 16, if the Saints are out of it. Now, last year they weren't really. That division was pretty tight because no one pulled away from it. But if the Saints are out of it, I wouldn't be surprised to see Rattler start down the stretch and give everyone reason for off-season talking, like, do we need Carr or can Rattler be the guy? Like it has the makeups of all things NFL as far as quarterback controversy goes.
Absolutely. All right, let's head over to the Giants, and probably the biggest winner on this team from the draft from a fantasy perspective was Daniel Jones, right? The Giants were rumored that they might spend a first-round pick at number 6 to get the heir apparent there to Daniel Jones, or flat out be the replacement there. And they don't. They bring in a top-tier wide receiver to help bolster that. Thoughts on this group?
That offense has a lot of work to do. Losing Saquon's going to hurt. Daniel Jones trying to see if last year was a down year or if Dayball is unable to reach Daniel Jones and it's going to be more of the same. But I mean, watching some of those Giants games last year, guys, part of the reason was he had no stinking time to throw the ball.
Right.
Like Daniel Jones hit his third step and was getting smoked in the grill. Like it was nuts how bad that offensive line play was. So it's not all on the quarterback, although he does get the recognition for all, wins and losses and everything else. But, you got to feel good about if you're Malik Neighbors, like be the guy. Like we can be, what they're telling each other. We can be this, this generation's version of Eli and Odell. We can be that. Like that's what they're trying to talk themselves into.
Right.
I don't see that.
No, neighbor. No, I mean, especially skill set wise, right? Neither one of those guys is
those
a
guys.
young Odell or a in your prime Eli Manning. But
so
whatever you do to talk yourself up, right? Like
right.
that's what you have as far as organizational dreams is when those two were clicking. The Giants were really fun to watch because it was one touch and go. I don't know that Neighbors quite has the burst to be one touch and go, but he can be a half step down from like a Jamar Chase. He has the skill set to do that.
Sure. What I'm concerned about is that receiver room as a whole is Neighbors is good, right? What are we going to get out of Darius Slayton, out of Wan'Dale Robinson, and let's throw Jalen Hyatt in there, right? Like, look at their depth chart right now. It's busy in the wide receiver room. Obviously, not all these dudes are going to, make the final 53. But, like, when it boils down to it, it's still Daniel Jones throwing the football. That's hard for me to get past. Like,
Hyatt's got to expand his route tree.
Right.
Otherwise, he's just a 9 route guy, right? Like
he's your
got
go
to be able to do something besides burn. And that was something we talked about with him coming out as a rookie, right? Like the expanded route tree. I didn't see it last year.
And
like,
I don't
dinged up. He didn't play all the games. Like all the wide receivers got hurt in New York at some point, but it's
that field they were playing on. Anyways,
concrete.
Yeah. But like it doesn't give me, the warm and fuzzies from that receiving room coupled with the quarterback that is, distributing the football. I've never been a big, I haven't had many Giants shares over the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't think that that's going to change for me this year. No, regardless of, Neighbors could be great. He's at a reliant position and I'm not relying on the guy that he needs to rely on.
Fair enough. It should let us know pretty quick whether all this hype that we've heard all these years that Daniel Jones is a great thrower of the deep ball. I haven't necessarily seen it, but that now would be the time for that to showcase.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Eagles really didn't add anything either when it came to the draft for offensive skill positions. Will Shipley in the 4th at the running back. You also had Anaya Smith and Johnny Wilson at wide receiver in the 5th and 6th rounds there.
So I'm slightly intrigued. I got to see Anaya Smith up close here. I'm intrigued by that play, right? He's kind of a gadget, really good returner. And with supposedly the return of, kick returns to the NFL, I think that's where he'll get a lot of his play early is as a kick return, punt returner. I think he'll be an interesting stash. Certainly not worth, I don't think, anything higher, than like a double-digit round pick. But I think he will be useful to the Eagles some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure exactly how, but I think he will be useful to the Eagles. And it may not be in a way that is super helpful to fantasy owners in year one, other than some of his return work. But I do think that he'll find a way. He was the only reason that the A&M offense clicked last year, and the year previous, I should say. He was a huge part of that. He got hurt late, but like that dude willed that team to some wins, and which is really strange to say coming out of the wide receiver spot.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by Shipley also. I think his skill set paired with Saquon's is fairly interesting, especially since the Eagles traditionally love to spread backfield touches around. Like the Eagles offense in general, when it comes to the running back room, I am interested to see what this looks like in 2024. Like, do you feed Saquon because you brought him in to feed him and take the pressure off of Jalen Hurts and everything that kind of goes along with that? Or are you spreading touches? Because if you're spreading touches, Shipley's worth a late round flyer also, right?
Right.
Like, see what happens if there's an injury, if he gets hot, like something like that. Shipley becomes kind of relevant, at least in some capacity, because running backs just get hurt in the NFL. So that pick
Saquon's a violent
intrigues
runner.
me. Yeah.
Like,
So Shipley intrigues me for that reason. I'm not like busting down the door, but he's another guy. Later rounds in rookie drafts. Yeah, I'll take a flyer on Will Shipley. Why the heck not?
Right. Well, and Shipley's a guy too that with some of his special teams, he could find the field that way too.
I want to know who got fired in the Eagle or who moved on from the Eagles scouting department, because not one Georgia Bulldog taken in this year's draft by them.
Oh, that's funny.
They took it from the champion. They took it from the championship teams.
They really did. They really did.
So yeah, well, I mean, heck, we'll see, right? But they got some defensive back help, right? They did what they needed to do for that. And it wasn't fantasy. It wasn't splashy fantasy wise, like Derek said.
They got two of maybe the top
had a solid draft.
4 defensive backs.
Yeah,
like, they got 2 of the top 4.
Yeah, and 8 trades throughout the draft, set a new record. 8 trades throughout the draft, and through all the trading, they got an extra 3rd, 4th, and 5th next year.
Yeah,
like they did a good job. Yeah, they did a good job for the organization. It's just not like coming out of the draft. All the players are still the players, right? Like
right.
Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, and you have Goddard, and you have Hurts and Saquon. Like outside of that, none of that team is, can be sniffing my starting lineup sans injury.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Seattle also didn't really add anything of note there. They added a tight end, AJ Barner, in the 4th. But any thoughts on this group, or we're just ready to move along?
Well, move along, because they now have like 6 tight ends on their active roster.
And
they're all going to see like 6 catches.
Pharaoh Brown, AJ Barner, Brady Russell. Those are just because NFL or ESPN only goes to the 4 deep on the 2 deep. That's incredible. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's nuts, right? Like, and all of them will get 10 to, or what? All 6, yeah. They're all going to end up with like 15 receptions throughout the year, right?
The
like
team is largely the same as it was last year. And it was a fine offense last year.
Yeah, you want JSN to develop, right? You're hoping he kind of takes over, and you need Gino
Lockett to do
to
their
play
thing.
like the comeback player of the year is what you need. Like the performance you got out of Gino last year was not good enough. So you need all these extra draft picks along the offensive line and on the defense to put Gino in the good situation, so that way they can do their thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we mentioned Ricky Pearsall earlier with the Niners. Any other thoughts on the Niners?
Not as currently constructed, right? Like the players are the players, right? We all know who their top end guys are. Until it changes, that's who you're drafting.
Yeah.
Yep. So Tampa Bay brought in Jalen McMillan, Bucky Irving at the wide receiver, running back, and they also brought in Delvin Cupp in the 7th round at tight end. Any thoughts here in Tampa?
Bucky's interesting as a spell back for Rachaad White. So Rachaad White had almost 340 touches last year. That is not sustainable. So if his efficiency can pick up by taking some of those touches away, I mean, if you take 25% of those touches away from Rashad White, that's still a pretty good workload for a running back in the NFL today, and it gives Bucky a clear path to volume. So, I'm intrigued. I'm going to be watching, but I do like me some Rashad White.
Fair enough. I think the Jalen McMillan is actually a really interesting one there, and I'm very intrigued to see how they're going to utilize him. They obviously have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They had Trey Palmer last year, and Trey Palmer was working primarily out of the slot. So it'll be interesting to see some reports coming out there that they plan on moving Godwin into the slot and then looking for that other outside to complement Mike Williams. And if Jalen McMillan can be that outside presence, there as well, like that could be very interesting as well. So that's one of those that I'm really intrigued to see how that one looks as we start getting into training camps and how that, he's taking reps at and what that offense is looking like, come training camp and through the preseason.
I like that. Godwin's the best. Godwin's at his best when he's playing out of the slot. So I like that move for Godwin and what that does for Baker.
It feels like, we know that they are, putting their weight behind Baker, right, with the contract, but, you draft a center in round 1. Like, that feels like a vote of confidence in your quarterback, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, by adding a piece to protect him and improve the offense and all, but like to go center with your first round pick, vote of confidence for Baker. It makes Baker more, I mean, not that he ever wasn't, but it makes him more intriguing in my eyes.
Fair enough. All right. And round it out, Washington, had the second overall pick, brings in Jaden Daniels. Also brought in Luke McCaffrey at the wide receiver, Ben Sinnott at tight end. Any thoughts here on Washington and kind of winners and losers here?
It's still going to be tough up there in Washington. Like, Jaden Daniels, I think, is good, but it's going to be tough.
I think Daniels is the winner. He goes into a situation, he can start right away. That team's going to be trailing in football games, so he's going to be asked to do a lot of things. We'll get to see his legs in action, right? Those cheap points in fantasy football. So to me, it's Jaden Daniels who is the winner there. You could argue that it was
like an Austin Eckler.
I mean,
run the football a little bit more
to an extent. Diami Brown, right? Jahan Dotson might have been the winners because those guys weren't necessarily overly impressive, but they didn't bring anybody in to really push him. I don't think Luke McCaffrey is going to do that. So we'll see if he's able to work his way into like that, next man up type deal. But starting out, he's going to be 4th or 5th on the depth chart to start the season. He's going to have some work to do.
Yeah. Well, and Luke McCaffrey is kind of a development project anyway.
It's not very big.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a guy that's
he's bigger than I thought.
6'2", 200 pounds. I mean, that's a pretty typical size receiver.
There must be a 4th one that's like not very big.
I think there's 4 McCaffrey brothers, and
so Christian. There was one that played quarterback at Michigan and then transferred to UNC, and then this one at Rice. I think the 4th one's not very big.
And the Luke McCaffrey
Christian,
started
Luke, Max, and Cade. Is that who they are?
I thought there was a Dylan in there.
Dylan. Yeah.
Dylan was the quarterback.
Yeah,
that played at Michigan and then transferred to Northern Colorado when his dad was the coach.
And I think he's taller.
He is.
I think actually Christian might be the shortest of the brothers there, but
it's fair.
Regardless,
he's built like a tank.
It's fair. Yeah. So, but yeah, Luke McCaffrey just also transitioned into a wide receiver like a year or two ago, and he's a little bit of a development project there. I think he's probably got 2 or 3 years to see what's there, really. But yeah, I would agree. I think Jaden Daniels is certainly the winner there. Kind of any other thoughts here before we start wrapping it up?
Oh, good mix, right? I mean, there's pluses and minuses across the board, but that's what the draft is, right? You're never going to be able to plug all your holes. You're just trying to find, the right pieces to plug in at cheaper monetary values, so that way you can add veteran pieces along the way and continue to play with the cap and all that good stuff. So, there weren't too many. I don't know, outside of Atlanta's pick that we covered at the very beginning.
Right.
I don't know that anyone did a terrible job in the draft, right? Like, you can justify your way through all of it
Yeah.
on both in both conferences. So I don't know that anyone just completely bombed it. Sans Atlanta's first round pick. Like, yes, there were some other questionable picks where maybe we thought other guys were maybe a slightly better fit, but that was the pick of the draft that had everyone questioning it, and it happened so damn early that it gave everyone all weekend to talk about it. So they weren't paying nearly as much attention to any of the other questionable picks.
Fair. Did you guys see the deal where the Arthur Blank came up after
The
the
GM looked like he was trying to explain.
Like, well, you see what had happened was the thing with this and then that and then the other thing over here
turned in the wrong card.
Yeah. I mean, we had another guy's name written here, but when you can go out there and you can get your guy and you can just load up at depth on a position that,
don't need to load up on
that was they should have gone defense.
They should have.
Oh well, we'll see how it shakes out for them. I mean, but
actually
they're gonna have a really hard time not having a bunch of armchair quarterbacks going, you guys screwed this up. Like, we worked so hard trying to build from nothing, and we got all these draft picks, and then you screw it up on this one.
Well, the funny thing is, could you actually have imagined Kirk Cousins with both Odunze and Drake London and Kyle Pitts to be able to throw the ball to? Like,
oh geez, yeah,
that could have been something.
Or you take pass rusher in the first, and then you come back with Rome Wilson out of Michigan,
right
there in the second or third, and you call it good. Like, it was just, there were some other paths, but it's not the way they went.
It's very true. Alrighty. Well, guys, I think that's going to bring us to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Go freaking Avs. Moving on.
There you go. Denver sports teams are happy. Avs and Nuggets are both going to advance to the second round. So.
Don't pay attention to whatever the Colorado Rockies are doing. Denver sports teams, yeah.
Denver playoff teams.
That's accurate.
But yeah, like I said earlier, we are in rookie draft season. I know they're all spread out and at different times. Some already started, some starting a week, some might start tomorrow, whatever. Feel free to hit us up, right? At Good Old Boys FF, wherever you're consuming your intake of all things media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. But feel free to hit us up. Derek and I are actively in a bunch of these, so we can share our thoughts, opinions. I know we kind of have a group where we've been bouncing some things around already between a couple of the leagues where we're not in them together, or if we're kind of on opposite ends of the board and it doesn't really matter anyway. We'll talk about it. So we're here to help. Let us know. But happy draft season, and we'll be back next week to cover the AFC.
Absolutely, be a good time. And Kevin already mentioned it, but I'm gonna hit it up again. Make sure that you head over to YouTube, youtube.com/@goodoldboysff. Click that subscribe button, ring that bell. Best way to help support this independent podcast. That's gonna do it for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.